Undersecretary of the State Department, Kennedy, Patrick F. Kennedy, said that an unnamed U.S. intelligence agency, this is on screen right now, a terror suspect kept visa to avoid tipping off larger investigation. And then when you read it, it says they were ordered to let him get on the plane and waive his visa. So, boom. Same thing with the Fort Hood shooter. They wanted to bust him. They were ordered for 2 years to leave him alone. Same thing with all of these events. So once you know how they do it, and once you see them really promote something and push it, and I don't want to waste, I mean, we want to hear from you instead of me ranting, but it was the same story with the Joe Stack flying into the IRS building. All the same story, Jesse.
Okay. Well, that clears it up a little bit.
But I mean, my point is, I went on air in the week after that happened, and I said, no, it may just be a lone Muslim nut. But then, in every case, it's like the 9/11 hijackers. I've had the head of the U.S. Embassy in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on. They were ordered, even though they were on a terror list, to let them in, and the CIA called and said, they work for us. This is part of national security. That's on record, too.
How do you find all this stuff, Alex?
Well, I've become completely obsessed and addicted to researching it. And, you know, I saw Springman, the head of the embassy, in the Toronto Star the month after 9/11. I interviewed him then. I've interviewed him many other times since then. I had him on a month ago, and he said clearly the underwear bomber's the same deal, and he was the head of the embassy.
Wow. Interesting stuff.
Well, but you know how criminals work, though. They do things in a pathological way, meaning over and over again. So it's...
Well, and the other thing is, too, if it works one time, it'll work again.
Exactly. I mean, take Northwoods. Kennedy says no in 63, but then what did they do a year later at Tonkin? What did they do a few years later in 67 with the Liberty? I mean, they do the same thing over and over again. What is Northwoods, right here in my hand, folks, what does Operation Northwoods say they'll do? They'll bomb D.C., bomb Miami, graze troops at U.S. bases, wound them, grazing troops. What did we see at the Pentagon?
Exactly what you said.
and who sat at the feet of L.L. Lemonster, who set up the continuity government plan under Nixon, but Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld?
Yeah. Well, then I loved that thing in '92 when they were part of that think tank. You know, where they did the something or other experiment or whatever. It was Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Cheney, the whole thing, and they get all. And the question was, how do we keep the United States the sole superpower now with the fall of the Soviet Union? And they go through this litany of everything, and then in the end, it's got the summary. To implement everything we've recommended will take many, many, many years, unless a Pearl Harbor type of event were to occur.
And they said 3,000 dead, like Pearl Harbor. What happened on 9/11?
Exactly.
Oh, it's incredible. But see, that's the problem. You hit on something key here. Most of the so-called conspiracy theorists do just say everything's a conspiracy without evidence. And so I'm a conspiracy, you're a conspiracy, Ron Paul's a conspiracy with no evidence, ignoring the fruit of what we do. But that's not really the public's fault. If the government has been caught lying more than they tell the truth, and there's a total loss of confidence, then there's just going to be a loss of confidence in everything. What do we do about that?
You know how I counter that, Alex? I got that again today, where they said, are you a conspiracy theorist? And I looked at Alan Combs asked me that. And I looked back at him and said, well, Alan, the government's a conspiracy theorist too. They've never proved anything. I said, look at all the murders that took place in the 60s and early 70s, all those assassinations, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Jack Kennedy. There was never a trial for any of these guys. Notice how there's never a trial for any of these assassins that happened.
Well, we know under COINTELPRO that got declassified in 77 that the FBI would stage events, stage crimes, and blame it on people. We know Obama's regulations are, Cass Sunstein wrote a big policy paper saying infiltrate 9/11 truth and commit acts of violence so we can put them in jail.
Yeah, I couldn't believe when I read that about that guy from Harvard that wrote that paper saying that the 9/11 truthers and all this stuff, that they should be, put under surveillance and all this other stuff. Why? Because we question our government? You know, I can't. I have to sit and think that all the founding fathers of this country have got to be turning over in their graves right now.
They are. We're going to skip this break coming up with Jesse Ventura. He'll be with us into the next hour. I want to start getting into the book here in just a moment, chapter by chapter, because believe me, folks, when I tell you, you need to get this book. When I was sent an advance copy, I didn't carry Ventura's last book, because when I did call to get it, it was sold out. I got involved early because I want people to read this. I mean, this is just incredible information, but let's bring up a few other issues. We know Secretary of Defense Cohen in '97 told the Army Times, we have earthquake weapons, we have weather weapons, so do other governments. A lot of that's been declassified. The new White House science czar says they are geoengineering the earth, manipulating the weather right now. That'd be a great episode because it's all pretty much admitted, but we could go deeper into it.
Well, we kind of did that with HAARP.
And that's where I'm going.
Yep.
With the Chile earthquake and with and this is even on CNN, and with the Haiti earthquake, they reported the sky had like an aurora borealis even during the day in the minutes before the earthquake. And I'm not saying these were staged, but if the government admits they have these systems, I mean, do we at least investigate it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. They did that. It was the same thing in Indonesia, too, when they had the huge tsunami there. There was no indication of it. There was no earthquake before it. And I remember when I was doing my show, of course, Alex, not you, but Alex on the show, who's always the cynic, he said to me, Governor, are you trying to say that they would intentionally kill all these people for no reason? And I said, Alex, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying they could just be testing this thing out. And maybe when they test it out, this is the result. What do you think? They're going to come back then and say, oops?
Exactly. Some mathematicians, when we posted this on InfoWars and Prison Planet a few weeks ago, have looked at the frequency of mega earthquakes, these big earthquakes, 8 and above, and it's mathematically getting very suspicious that they keep hitting right in population centers.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
Man.
But then again, of course, I'm playing the devil's advocate, Alex, not necessarily big, but, you know, we've always had earthquakes even before we had the technology, so it may not be fair to attribute every earthquake to them.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think these are probably just natural. But if the government admits they have this, then you've got to start looking into it. I mean, we are in the 21st century.
And you know what's interesting about it, too, was that treaty that everybody signed years ago saying that they would not use, if anyone developed the capability to control the weather, that it could not be used in a situation of war and all that. But I suppose they view it as, well, we're not at war.
Well, that's another great point that you just made. And let's get into something that's a little bit more fun and not so hardcore, but also interesting. I heard months ago that you'd been involved in a secret film project. We now know what it is. What more can you tell us about your project with the Wachowski brothers, of course, of Matrix and V for Vendetta fame?
I'll tell you what, that was the most bizarre movie shoot I've ever been on in my life. I have no idea what the end result of this movie will be. I haven't got a clue, and I'll tell you why. These guys, they're way out there, but they're great people, I'll tell you that. But these guys are on another level when it comes to creativity. Alex, what they did to me, here was my role. They brought me in, and I spent an hour and a half. Here's what I do know. The movie will take place 100 years in the future. So I come in, and they do an hour and a half makeup job on me to where they put me in almost like a wetsuit type thing. They gave me multicolored dreadlocks all the way down to the middle of my back and my shoulders. I got a big, huge Fu Manchu type goatee beard with the beads in it and all that stuff. And then they gave me in the center of my forehead it looked like almost a third eye. Right? and here was my part. I didn't have to memorize a line. Lana Wachowski sat across from me, and simply all they wanted to do was ask me questions about how I felt about the war in Iraq and the whole Bush-Cheney thing and all of that stuff, and they allowed me to just vent. But the way I looked, did you ever see John Travolta what he looked like? And it was a bomb of a movie, but that thing, Battlefield Earth?
Oh, yes, I saw it.
That's about what I looked like, even more bizarre. And so I'm sitting there looking this bizarre, talking about things that are a passion to me right now, and just allowed to freewheel. So I'm going to be very, very interested. I can't wait to see what in the hell this movie's about. And I'll get us back to the Huffington Post for a moment. Ariana Huffington was next. And they had her decked out. She looked like the Queen of Sheba or Cleopatra.